You're going to learn a lot from tonight's program. We're going to talk about the president's actions on immigration. Yes, Professor Joe Cammarano from Providence College is here tonight. It would be his second appearance here, and the last time I was here, we really got after it on a couple of issues. I really enjoy his company. I enjoy his acumen. I enjoy his perspective, and I enjoy the idea that he doesn't let me get away with anything here when it comes to these issues. So I think you will enjoy the show, and I hope that you do each and every night, weeknight 7:30, and don't forget at 11:30. And by the way, if you missed the program, you can go to foxprovidence.com and see it online every single night. We post the show right after we're done airing it the first time at 8 o'clock. To the rundown we go. That's how it feels, anyway, with the latest move by the president post-Ferguson. This guy just wasn't thinking, but he will probably have a little bit of time to do so. You just have to get a plan, man. It's just the city of Providence is just way too slow in economic development here. Moving along, we've got out-of-towner joining the Raimondo administration. Lions and tigers and bears, oh my. This is just going to aid and abet something that should never go on. And of course, we want to hear what you have to think on your state of mind, so just let us know. We'll tell you how. Let's dig in, see what we have here, develop these concepts. More Big Brother. That's kind of how it feels to me. Here's the Time.com headline. The president requests funds for police body cameras now, post-Ferguson. They had this little seance yesterday, and he came up with this idea amongst a whole bunch of reforms that he wants to drive from the White House. CBS has the latest.
In Atlanta, Attorney General Eric Holder spoke at Ebenezer Baptist Church, where Martin Luther King Jr. once preached about the White House response, part of which aims to improve relations between police and citizens.
We will remain firmly resolved to stand shoulder to shoulder with you in driving this work into the future.
In the next few days, Holder says the Justice Department will unveil new federal guidelines designed to end racial profiling. As part of the federal reforms, the president has requested funding for 50,000 body cameras to be worn by police and for new training for law enforcement nationwide.
This is not a problem simply of Ferguson, Missouri.
You know, there's no doubt it's not just a problem in Ferguson, Missouri. We've had all of these protests running all around the country. A couple of things that are problematic. First of all, it's 50% funding, which is what the federal government always does. They come up with an idea, they pay for half of something for a few years, and the local government is stuck with the mess. That's number one. But, you know, it's a priority. Some 5,000 police departments dabble with this technology, which is different depending on who you buy and how you buy it and what you buy. You've got $120 devices and you've got $900 devices, some of which have more high-tech capability than the next. And then you got all the downloading that goes along with all this, and whether it can see in front of you, behind you, sideways, and all that. But, you know, the thing that strikes me, and I'm not sure that there's a resolve for this, is that this is kind of a big brotherish move. It seems like everything in society today we solve by adding cameras to watch everybody's behavior. And while I have no doubt that this will change behavior, it doesn't help the relationship, which is what I thought maybe we might be able to work on from this awful story out of Missouri. We'll see. Next item. Yeah, this is just crazy. I'll just let the story roll because, well, we got a headline on it, of course. It's just WPRI Target 12 story, and Walt Buteau has a very interesting one here. Watch this.
Before the protest shut down Route 95 last Tuesday night, police tell us a crowd of about 100 people circled a burning American flag, blocking the fire department garages that hold the Central Station's fire trucks and rescue units. 2.5 minutes into the video, which was shot by RI Future, a member of the crowd notices a man in a firehouse window.
Yeah, look at the guy behind you! Hey, look at that!
The Public Safety Commissioner tells Target 12 the guy in the window was an on-duty firefighter who is now being investigated internally for potential discipline. Stephen Perry tells Target 12, quote, the gesture incited the crowd in a way that could have been dangerous to the officers who were trying to manage and keep the protesters safe. Perry also tells us there could be a policy violation since it appears an on-duty firefighter, paid by taxpayers, was not being neutral. Target 12 also reached out to the head of the firefighters union, who would only say he can confirm that a union member is being investigated for the incident.
Come on, man, what are you thinking? You know, you're on duty, you're in uniform, you're at the public safety complex, and you're making that gesture supporting the burning of the American flag, which, by the way, is a completely First Amendment protected right of the citizens as long as they're not harming anybody. It really upsets a lot of people. The phone lines ring on the radio. Dan York, weekdays noon to 3 on WPRO, every time you bring it up. But this guy should be jammed up for a couple of weeks anyway on suspension for violating the neutrality of his office. That's fairly self-explanatory, I think. Next item. Crazy. Yeah, come on. Can we just get a plan? Get a plan, man. Check the headline on this. So you got this developer that wants to put the 500 apartments into the first real parcel that the 195 Redevelopment Commission has actually been able to make a deal on. It's a Dallas company. And while there are people who say, wait a second, we need jobs, not places for young people to lay down and sleep. Regardless, I've had a conversation with Colin Kane, who heads up this 195 redevelopment group, and he says, listen, this is 4% of the entire parcels that sit at the beautiful empty opportunity since we moved the highway 195. But they've been working on this for, a year plus, and the city of Providence hasn't figured out that they've got to be synergistic with this commission and have a tax plan, man. Right now, that land generates no revenue whatsoever. So a tax stabilization plan that grows revenue over the course of 12 years makes all the sense in the world. Angel Tavares, for some reason, doesn't want it. The new guy, Jorge Elorza, better do it. And collectively, they should get together today and get it done. Get a plan, man. Get on the same page. Wow. It's like very simple. Oh, who's going to come in here and make a deal for land that they don't have a tax plan for? Ay, ay, ay. All right, sorry. It just seems so obvious. Oh boy, you don't do this in Rhode Island. You don't go out of town. Here's a headline: Gina Raimondo, she hires this guy Steve Newman from Maryland, I think. He's been working with in North Carolina. He's worked with elected officials and governors down there, and he's going to be Raimondo's chief of staff. Oh boy, she's ruffling the feathers already, bringing in an out-of-towner. Here's my thought on that. Good. A little fresh air and a fresh perspective can go a long way. Now, will he be a good guy or a bad guy, effective or not? That'll be determined by what happens. But the idea that fresh blood is brought in is not a bad thing. Relax, everybody. And finally, really? All right, listen, I'm all about digital marketing and online websites, so now you can buy your Thin Mints online. Yep, the Girl Scouts are going digital. They're authorizing the little ones, the young ladies, to sell their cookies online. All right, I don't have a problem with it. It's a whole lot less about the platform, but I'll tell you, this platform will only enhance the mommies and the daddies who abuse the process of learning for their little Girl Scouts and sell the cookies themselves. The only thing a mom or a dad should do to sell the Girl Scout cookies is to watch them as they go knocking on somebody's door to make sure that they are safe. You don't bring in your list to work. You don't put the thumb down on the people that work with you or at church or whatever. Maybe you pick up a few boxes for them and help them with the heavy labor. But if you start building websites for your daughters to win the quota contest, you are only going to feed the beast, which I think makes this entire cookie sale process perverted. How's that? By the way, Thin Mints don't taste like they used to anyway. Let's move on to your state of mind. You can contact us by calling us. You can contact us by emailing us. You can contact us by tweeting at us and by posting on the Facebook, which a lot of you like to do, as this viewer does. Leave it to the media to announce the decision was going to happen like 5 hours before, so to rile up the people in that area and get good footage of the violence. That's John talking about Ferguson, Missouri last week. Well, leave it to the authorities to decide to say, by the way, we've got a jury decision, and wait 5 hours to release it. Chicken or the egg. The media likes to get, people like to blame the media for everything. On this one, John, swing and a miss. Can't agree. When we come back, the professor from PC, sharp guy. You'll learn a lot. Stay with us. Well, you know what hit the the other day last week. Before Ferguson blew up with the grand jury decision not to indict, we were all battling about immigration and the president's executive orders. And I was straightened out on the radio the other day by Professor Cammarano from Providence College, who told me I was all wet worrying about this constitutionality issue regarding the president's executive orders. And so, for those of you who think this guy is violating the Constitution, get your popcorn because you're going to enjoy this. Good to see you again, my friend.
Great to be here.
You don't think this immigration exercise by the president, which you characterize as a presidential action with executive orders inside it, is a constitutional problem at all?
Everything's a constitutional problem, therefore nothing is. That the Constitution vests in the power of the president executive authority to implement the law as they see fit. And presidents since Teddy Roosevelt have expanded. Every president has expanded over the prior president. The type of actions he's doing is similar to what Nixon did in what we call the administrative presidency. He couldn't get legislation passed through Congress, so what he does is he finds ways as executive to tinker, which is what Obama's doing.
You don't like it.
I hate it.
Okay, so I wanted to get that up front. Yeah. So when people are throwing banana peels at the TV because they think this guy has done something extraordinarily different, we'll talk about the differentiations of the various orders. You don't like it
because I think constitutionally, the president has never been the center of the government. It's always been Congress. We have a legislative center of government. We found loopholes without changing the Constitution that have allowed presidents to act as if they're elected rulers for the most part. And every time any president goes beyond the letter of the law, they push the boundaries further and further away from what really is meant to be the equilibrium of Congress and the presidency working together or fighting together.
Right, so are you contradicting yourself by suggesting that stretch of law doesn't bump up against the Constitution?
Well, basically, it comes from the idea that started with Thomas Jefferson, but really Teddy Roosevelt espoused most clearly, called stewardship theory. And he said, look, president's a steward of the public interest. In order to be a good steward, you push the Constitution as far as the other institutions let you go. So if Congress pushes back, you let up. If the court pushes back, you let up. And so this is part of the game of American politics. There's an equilibrium going on, and if the president didn't push, that would mean that Congress dominates, and the framers didn't want that either.
So I think constitutional discussion is really a fascinating concept, and I'm sure this is what you teach your students on this, and what else?
I teach American national politics, political behavior, public administration, things like that.
The concept then of the Constitution being what? Rigid, less rigid?
It's not rigid at all.
It's not rigid at all.
Oh, it's designed not to be rigid.
Okay.
It's designed to be sort of mercurial. And so what happens is, if certain events require strong presidents, like the September 11th attacks, what happens is Congress recedes and the president expands. If, on the other hand, the president goes a little too far, presidents get pushed back by the courts or by Congress, and it's this sort of back and forth. It's meant to be tension between the others because the goal was don't let anyone dominate our system.
Right. Well, checks and balances is the overriding theme here, right? So if it was checks and balances, it has to be a fluid situation to continue to check and balance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. The concept, though, that going to the immigration decision that he has made, some will point to what Ronald Reagan did, i.e., by extending to families a little bit more leeway under the previous immigration law. Right. They'll point to the Reagan move, executive order, to legitimize what this president has done. Would you concede that this is a much further detailed action plan by this president past what Reagan did?
I think it's, number one, a little more detailed. Number two, not quite analogous to what Reagan did, because Reagan was what we call perfecting the law through implementation. That Reagan was staying with the original intent by Congress. This is not in any way, shape, or form the intent of the current Congress. And so Obama is actually disobeying the congressional intent by going in this other direction. It's completely legal and constitutional, and the extent to which he gets away with it is determined by how others push back.
All right, well, I'd like to talk about that when we come back, because if he's going away from what it is that Congress wants, then is he writing his own law? That's what a lot of you are thinking anyway. Stay with us.
I understand that some of them are already saying that my actions sabotage their ability to pass a bill and make immigration work better. Why? Why? I didn't dissolve Parliament. That's not how our system works. I didn't steal away the various clerks in the Senate and the House who manage bills. They can still pass a bill.
You know, the president's having a little bit of fun right there. I'm not so sure about the politics of him being such a wise guy about this entire thing. But he makes a point that even I have made, and that is the Congress can act on its own.
Of course he can.
And create legislation that creates the kind of immigration bill that'll make everybody happy, or at least, well, nobody's always happy, but they could act on their own. And they got their own problems in doing that. So he's kind of poking at them. The politics of this thing are very interesting.
I agree, and it's unfortunate. It seems to be the primary motive, both for President Obama and for Congress. You're right, Congress is not affected at all by the presidential actions. If anything, it should motivate them to write legislation quicker and more comprehensively to limit what he can do. The reason he can do what he's doing is the law is vague enough that there's some wiggle room for him to do these sorts of things.
So going into the break, I asked the question whether or not the president is actually writing his own law rather than executing one, and without putting all sorts of graphics up on the screen and trying to explain the actual workings of the current legislation. What's the short answer? You think that he is executing law even though he's going in a direction opposite of Congress's intent?
Yeah, this is very clearly within the realm of executive authority in any government. And so he's not creating law. However, he is having an impact on the policy itself through its implementation.
All right, so let's talk about the basics. I mean, we're talking about up to 4 or 5 million people here who will now find a way not to be afraid of their existence here in the country by having a clearer path to some kind of permanent status. Details, I think, are still going to be worked out in terms of how this whole thing is going to go, but for the most part, we have people who can come out of the shadows and not worry so much. Frankly, I don't think there were a lot of people worrying in the shadows anyway, because we weren't getting a lot of enforcement unless you were making crimes. We weren't chasing you out and deporting you anyway. But anyway, your thought on the law that exists and what he's doing.
Right. Your last point is an important one in the sense that we're not enforcing these laws because we don't allocate the resources, because we're not willing to pay the enormous tax bill that would require the types of resources to throw everybody out. And we also don't want to disrupt families with children who were born here, and that's what this action is sort of aimed at. And most of the people being affected have kids. And so I think what's happening is that, it's kind of a way for the president to say, look, I'm the chief law enforcement officer of the United States. I have to pick and choose what I'm going to focus on. So instead of focusing on vandalism, I'm going to focus on crime.
Isn't the Attorney General the Chief Law Enforcement Officer?
Well, the Attorney General is actually under the supervision of the President, and so the President actually is the chief of every cabinet-level department and every agency of government.
The practicality of this is that he has thrown the ball back in Congress's lap. His timing. And by the way, I'm going to ask the professor to stick around for this afternoon's taping. And we're going to air another conversation later in the week because I'm fascinated by this stuff, and I think you are too. In a longer form, we'll extrapolate a little bit. But the timing of this was politically calculated. He didn't want to do what he did pre-November 4th and hurt even further the Democrats' chance to fledglingly hold on to the Senate, which they couldn't do anyway, right? So as soon as that's all over and feeling the wind behind his back, because he's kind of a free agent now, right? He just decides to, boom, pop everybody with it.
Yeah, and from a student of campaigns and elections, that was the wrong thing to do anyway. He should have embraced it a year ago and said, yeah, it might lead to a few people losing, but it probably won't lead to a lot more people losing than would lose anyway. But he did what he did in large part because he was asked to sort of delay the decision. But now we're talking about presidential politics, which is a national election. The Latino vote is increasingly important, and so it's really smart for him to do.
Okay, we'll have a conversation that I'll tell you when we come back, when our next conversation this will air. But in summary tonight, where we go from here is anybody's guess. What do you think happens?
Well, I think actually President Obama is in grave danger of being overturned by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is going to hear similar cases in the spring.
On Obamacare.
On Obamacare, but it has ramifications for this action. And it's, Justice Roberts, who was on the Obama side the first time around on Obamacare, seems to be pretty upset that Obama is going a little further than he had hoped.
With his presidential action.
Right.
That you say is constitutional and lawful, but you think the Supreme Court could overturn.
Sure, and the minute they declare his actions unconstitutional, it's no longer constitutional. But until they do, it is.
Would you think the Supreme Court is out of line in declaring
The Supreme Court
it
has
that
the
way?
right to do that. And no,
Well,
I
what will your
believe in the
opinion be?
tug and pull. My opinion would be that the president is being restrained, and that's a good thing.
You got all that? Political science. It's also an art. Thanks, Professor. Appreciate it. When I come back, I'll tell you about the next conversation. Alrighty, listen, we will continue the conversation with Professor Cammarano on Monday the 15th, because that's a scheduled day off for me. And I think if you're interested or frustrated by the governmental push and pull of this conversation, then get Mirage coming up on the 15th, all right? So I think these conversations are important. We have so little civics understanding about how our government works, never mind getting into the graduate level conversations. So I love it. See you on the radio tomorrow at noon on WPRO. Good night.